From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to another episode of Firstpost America, your global pit stop for the latest news and headlines from the United States and around the world. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. We'll get you a roundup of all the day's top stories, but first, let's take a look at the headlines. Russian President Vladimir Putin warns of a real risk of nuclear war if the United States and its allies escalate the conflict in Ukraine, warning any country sending troops to Kyiv could pose potential nuclear threats. Pro-Russia officials in Transnistria appeal to Moscow for protection, reviving fears for a Moldova breakaway region. The United States says it is closely monitoring the situation. U.S. congressional leaders reach a deal to avert a partial government shutdown by temporarily funding federal agencies through March. Consumer groups from 8 EU countries lodged complaints against Meta, accusing Facebook and Instagram of illegally using its pay or consent system as a smokescreen for privacy breaches. And finally, Saudi Arabia's football governing body suspends Al Nassr captain Cristiano Ronaldo for one game over a gesture he made on the pitch last week that was deemed as a provocation. We began with the latest from the Middle East, raising tensions and stakes in the ongoing negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas has called on Palestinians to march to Jerusalem's Al-Aqsa mosque on March 10th, when Ramadan, the holy month for Muslims, begins. The Hamas chief says Palestinians must come, pray, and stay at the mosque in order to break the siege.
This is a call to our people in Jerusalem and West Bank and the occupied areas inside Israel to march toward Al-Aqsa Mosque from the first day of the holy month of Ramadan, in individuals and in groups, to pray and stay in it and to break the siege of it. We address the esteemed resistance forces in our nations, who are now fighting their battle on many fronts in supporting of their brothers in Gaza, to intensify their battle for Al-Aqsa. Jerusalem is the compass of this blessed axis, and on the way to it, martyrs are made.
Now, the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in Jerusalem's Old City is one of the holiest sites for Muslims and the most sacred for Jews. In fact, it has long been a flashpoint for potential violence, particularly during religious holidays, and has been the most sensitive site in the Israel-Palestine conflict so far. Hamas Chief Ismail Haniyeh also called on the Arab states and self-styled axis of resistance, which consists of Iran's allies, including Lebanon's Hezbollah, Yemen's Houthis, and Islamic resistance in Iraq, to step up their support for Palestinians in Gaza.
Any flexibility we are showing in the negotiations is to protect the blood of our people and to put an end to their huge pains and sacrifices in the brutal war of extermination against it. In parallel, we are ready to defend our people. It is the duty of the Arab and the Islamic world and the duty of the brotherly countries neighboring occupied Palestine to take the initiative to break the conspiracy to starve the northern Gaza Strip.
Now, in response, Israel is accusing Hamas of igniting tensions even further. It also says it may set limits to worship at the compound during Ramadan according to its security needs. Now, this could set the stage for possible clashes if crowds of Palestinians do in fact turn up. Many Palestinians have rejected any such restrictions on their access to that site.
Hamas's top goal at this time is to cause a flare-up in Temple Mount so that we are forced to take some of the pressure off Hamas and move resources and forces to the West Bank and Jerusalem. We must not give them that. On the one hand, we are operating against terrorist elements, and on the other hand, it is our obligation to allow freedom of worship, and I think we will reach the right arrangements that would allow that.
Now, the United States has been pressing for a truce before Ramadan began. In fact, earlier this week, U.S. President Joe Biden said he hoped that a ceasefire would be agreed to by March 4th. Israel and Hamas both have delegations in Qatar this week hammering out details of a potential 40-day truce, which is also aimed at freeing additional hostages. In fact, Israel had agreed upon the proposal at talks with mediators in Paris just last week. According to reports, the Paris text would see Israeli troops pull out of populated areas and around 40 hostages go free in exchange for around 400 Palestinian prisoners. However, there are still wide gulfs between the two sides, and Hamas insists that any truce to release hostages must end with a permanent ceasefire and complete withdrawal of Israeli troops from Gaza. Now, Israel has rejected this, but Qatari mediators say that there are no breakthroughs yet. Meanwhile, Israel continues its offensive in Gaza. In fact, 79 people died overnight across the war-torn Palestinian enclave, taking the death toll beyond 30,000. In fact, food aid reaching Gaza has also severely declined over the past month, and international aid agencies say the residents are close to famine. Now, staying in the Middle East, a German naval frigate reportedly almost shot down a U.S. Reaper drone by accident. German media reports say missiles from the German ship nearly missed a U.S. drone. The German Defense Ministry confirmed a drone incident involving an allied nation without specifying the name of the country. The frigate was sent to the Red Sea as part of the EU's mission to help secure international shipping from attacks by Iran-backed Houthis. Now, according to German media reports, the frigate fired 2 missiles at the drone, but both crashed into the sea because of a technical defect. In fact, it opened fire after efforts to identify the unknown drone were unsuccessful.
There was an incident in which shots were also fired but missed, with a drone that turned out to be a reconnaissance drone, a so-called unmanned aerial vehicle, a UAV. Call procedures for identification were unsuccessful. In accordance with the rules of engagement, the frigate, Hesse, then made contact with all possible parties and initiated defensive measures. Ultimately, the aircraft was not shot down. So much with regard to the operational situation in the Red Sea.
Now, reports say that the American Reaper reconnaissance drone may have been in the area as part of an anti-terror mission unrelated to the Red Sea operations. The incident highlights the need for better coordination between allies involved in several missions in the region around Yemen. The frigate, known as the Hesse, which is crewed by 240 German soldiers and sailors, arrived in the Red Sea after Germany's parliament approved its participation in the mission just last week. On Wednesday, the German frigate successfully shot down 2 Houthi drones in just 15 minutes.
There was indeed a successful downing of 2 enemy drones yesterday evening. The frigate Hesse was patrolling its assigned region in the southern Red Sea in accordance with its mission, and it captured an unmanned drone. Shortly afterwards, it was successfully engaged. A quarter of an hour later, a second drone approached the ship. This was also successfully fought off. So that was a success for the time being.
Now, the United States is spearheading a naval coalition in the Red Sea with its allies. Both the United States and British forces have responded with several airstrikes on Houthi facilities in Yemen. Additionally, France, Greece, and Italy are also among countries participating in the EU mission that will initially see 3 vessels under EU command. America's European allies have been mandated to protect commercial ships and intercept attacks. However, they are not to take part in any strikes against the Houthis on land. Yemen-based Houthis have been increasing their strikes on ships in the Red Sea and the Bab al-Mandab Strait. They describe these attacks as acts of solidarity with Palestinians against Israel's war in Gaza. And now in the United States, the United States Supreme Court has agreed to hear Donald Trump's claim that he, as a former president, is immune from prosecution. The Supreme Court's decision, seen by many as a surprise, comes as a victory for Donald Trump's efforts to further delay a criminal trial charging him with plotting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Now, this puts the Republican presidential candidate on track for another high-stakes legal hearing, but in a social media post, Trump wrote, quote, "Without presidential immunity, a president will not be able to properly function or make decisions in the best interest of the United States of America," end quote. The court has set arguments for late April where it will decide whether former presidents are immune from prosecution for official acts they take in office. The court has also said that Trump's federal election interference trial would remain on hold for now. The hearing could push a trial close to Election Day or even beyond this year, which could have enormous political ramifications. If Trump does secure the Republican nomination and defeats President Joe Biden in November, he could order the federal cases pending against him dismissed. And he could also seek to pardon himself, though it remains unclear if presidents can actually pardon themselves. Now, of the 4 criminal cases Trump is facing, the only one with a trial date is a New York State prosecution, which charges him with falsifying business records in connection with hush money payments to a porn star. Now, this trial is slated to begin in late March. And adding to Trump's legal saga, on Wednesday, an Illinois judge stripped Trump from the state's Republican primary ballot. Now, Illinois is the 3rd state after Colorado and Maine to impose such a ban on the former president for his role in the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. The judge, however, is giving Trump time to appeal this latest ruling. And for our next story, we turn to Africa. Guinea's military junta is in fact stepping down. They have appointed a new prime minister for the West African nation. Former opposition leader Mamadou Oriba will hold the top post, and the political veteran has been asked to take charge of a crumbling economy amid nationwide unrest. The searing question, however, is can the fragile state actually be revived? Here's our full report.
The West African nation of Guinea has been under military rule since 2021. That's when Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya came to power. The military junta has ruled Guinea with a heavy hand, from arrests of political leaders to crackdowns on protests. Doumbouya has accumulated power despite opposition, but the tide seems to be changing. The military junta is having a change of heart. They're willing to let go of power and transition Guinea to civilian rule. The military junta has appointed Mamadou Ouri Ba as Guinea's next prime minister. It looks like the West African nation is returning to its democratic practices. Mamadou Ouri Ba, popularly known as Mr. Ba, is a seasoned politician. He's had his skin in the game since the 1990s, but he faces an uphill task of reviving a crumbling economy. Mr. Ba will also have to deal with nationwide unrest. Political violence has peaked in Guinea in the recent weeks. Thousands have been unhappy with the military junta and have taken to the streets. The demonstrations have often turned violent, including the death of civilians. Workers' unions have banded together in an attempt to oust the military junta.
On est choqué, frustré, très fortement.
The trade union movement is a movement of dialogue, of consultation, so that there can be peace and tranquility in our country. so that the transition of the military government of Junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya can succeed. Because we want this transition to succeed, so that there are no more transitions in this country.
Pour qu'il y ait la paix, la quiétude dans notre pays, pour que la transition.
Unrest increased after the military junta came cracking down on protests and media. But now the people have had enough. Guineans want a change and they're demanding it.
Alpha Condé c'est vrai, il a eu des problèmes avec la presse. Mais c'est que Doumbouya.
But what junta leader Mamadi Doumbouya has done today is worse, because Doumbouya even went as far as to cut off the internet in Guinea for more than a month. So, I think that General Doumbouya's reign is a disappointment, not only for the Guinean population, but also and especially for the Guinean press.
Le règne du général Doumbouya est une déception.
Guinea is a mineral-rich nation in West Africa. It's the world's second largest producer of bauxite. However, Guinea's economy took a major hit when the military took control. The West African Economic Bloc, called ECOWAS, or the Economic Community of West African States, imposed sanctions on Guinea after the coup. Trade was halted, which eventually led to high inflation and unemployment in Guinea. Now the military junta has promised to step down to make way for civilian rule. In return, ECOWAS has lifted its sanctions. Mr. Ba is going to become the Prime Minister soon. The former economist has been picked by the military to rejuvenate Guinea's economy in an attempt to give new hope to millions of Guineans.
Now, mosquitoes may seem minuscule, but their bite can in fact be devastating. Just ask Brazilians. The South African nation is confronting a major health emergency due to the overpopulation of mosquitoes. And their answer to the crisis is releasing more mosquitoes. I know it sounds bizarre, but that is actually how they are waging war against the dengue fever that these mosquitoes are in fact spreading. Our next story explains.
Never underestimate the potency of a mosquito. Though tiny, these creatures wield immense power, whether through their buzzing presence or the diseases they carry, like the dreaded dengue fever virus. Currently, Brazil is grappling with a relentless onslaught of dengue-spreading mosquitoes, triggering a widespread outbreak in the region. Health emergencies have been declared in areas including Sao Paulo, experiencing an unprecedented surge in infections, with Brazil already reporting 4 times the number of dengue cases recorded in the previous year. However, amidst this crisis, an unexpected solution has emerged: mosquitoes themselves. A British biotechnology company has taken on the responsibility of liberating Brazilians from the scourge of dengue-spreading mosquitoes. Their strategy? Releasing genetically modified mosquitoes into the affected region to curb the spread of infection. These savior mosquitoes have been developed by a company called Oxitec. They are male mosquitoes carrying a lethal gene designed to target and eliminate female mosquitoes. This is because the sole transmitters of diseases are female mosquitoes. This innovative approach marks a crucial step in combating the dengue menace. However, the process of neutralizing female mosquitoes is intriguing. It involves placing eggs in water-filled boxes to trigger incubation. After approximately 10 days, the boxes are opened, from which the genetically modified mosquitoes emerged, who are primed to eliminate their female counterparts. The mayor of Sao Paulo's Suzano city remains optimistic about the efficacy of these mosquito boxes. Strategically placed in the areas most affected, these boxes have already yielded promising results, with a 90% reduction in mosquito populations observed in neighboring areas post-release.
With this, we have centralized production, so there's a reduction in the infrastructure needed, which reflects on the cost and also on the ease of logistics from a factory, so we can transport to all Brazilian states and even export as we're doing today.
The exacerbation of the dengue fever outbreak by the hot rainy season has heightened the urgency of the situation.
Year after year, in this period, February to March, we have a mosquito boom because the rain comes again. The heat rises and the eggs that were dormant since last year, they hatch and become adult mosquitoes. So we use the biology of the species itself in our favor.
With over 973,000 cases reported so far and a rising death toll, Brazil is in dire need of innovative solutions like this mosquito intervention to combat the public health crisis. In addition to the direct impact on health, the dengue outbreak has also posed significant economic challenges. The cost of treating dengue patients, the loss of productivity due to illness, and the strain on healthcare resources are just some of the economic burdens faced by Brazil.
That's all that we have time for today. We certainly thank you for tuning in. Be sure to join us again tomorrow, and thank you so much for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
We're beating Biden.
How dare he say that?
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America.